You are all dressed so nicely today. Last week, CJ, in her sermon, talked a bit about covenant. It's a word very important in our congregational tradition. When I was ordained, I was given a stole with the scripture passage that signals the importance of covenant in the congregational tradition. Wherever 2 or 3 are gathered together, there am I. Formally speaking, for Congregationalists, this room in which we gather is not a sanctuary. It's a meeting house. It's not consecrated space. It's a place made holy by the very fact of our gathering, by the covenant we make with one another in the name of Christ to be a church. Today's passage from the first book of Samuel is part of a long saga of the relationship between Saul and David. Saul was chosen by God to be the first king of Israel, but he made mistakes, and one of them in direct disobedience to God, so God's favor was taken from him. David was chosen to be his replacement, but the transition was protracted war and struggle. The story has many twists and turns and a bit of humor from time to time. In this passage, though, we see the son of Saul, Jonathan, comes to David and essentially says that he supports the overthrow of his own father. He makes a covenant with David. A few chapters earlier, the text says that Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. The passage here is the last meeting between David and Jonathan before Jonathan was killed in battle. CJ preached last week on the passage in Matthew 10, or 11, I think, in which Jesus says, I come not to bring peace, but a sword, to set son against father and daughter against mother. Here we see exactly that happening. Jonathan set against father to unite in spirit with the person who will, by God's choice, unseat his father. As CJ said, he crossed a line, choosing the mission of God over the membership of family. Covenant in the midst of strife. Paul describes a similarly conflicted situation in his second letter to the church in Corinth. It seems by description and innuendo that there's a great deal of fuss going on in this church. And even though he helped establish this church, Paul is himself a source of anguish to some. And yet, this passage for today, he expresses his full confidence in this church and in his ministry to this church. They are bound by a covenant, a spiritual covenant of common devotion, a covenant that gives life, covenants in the midst of strife. These realizations have come to me slowly and sometimes painfully. I didn't grow up going to church. I had a bit of exposure in schools to Methodist and Episcopal worship, but I'm not sure when I arrived at college that I could have recited the Lord's Prayer from memory. But gradually, I found in myself something that was drawn to what religion provides. A world in which deep questions are at home and mystery is beloved. A world in which the exceptional is expected and the unimaginable treated as if it must, in some distant but actual future, come to pass. And every tear will be wiped away, including my own. A world intent upon changing the world. When I first arrived in Austin to interview for the teaching position at the Presbyterian Seminary, we had that time when the whole faculty gathers together around a long table, and I'm sitting at the end. And one of them asked me, after I had told all this story, my story, "So, when did you become a Christian?" Perhaps expecting some tale of striking moment of epiphany. I could have told her about the time when a drunk laid the gospel on me heavy in a DC jail. I could have told her about the time when a group of evangelicals, after a long evening of conversation around a campfire on Prince Edward Island, said they hoped that Christ would light a fire in my heart. And something indeed like that happened later that night, because I had left a couple of safety matches in my breast pocket, and they did ignite. But I spoke truthfully and said I had not the vaguest idea. I just gradually came to understand myself and be comfortable with that designation and that identity. I think I can honestly say that I was ordained a pastor in 1979 without having a settled and secure idea of what it meant to be a Christian. I did, however, know the Lord's Prayer. I was devoted, rather, to the insecure process of searching and testing this faith that we claim. I'm still on that journey, a journey I have shared with you for 21 years. What I know now is that the structure of faith for me is not a singular and solitary journey. It is built upon the footings of covenant. It is covenant that holds me to what I might call expeditionary spirituality. But it is also covenant that acts as an anchor, lest my quest become merely aimless floating on a sea of easy words and lofty notions. It is no accident that a primary symbol of the church is a ship, built both for travel and for security. It is never fully at rest. You sit right now in the nave of the church, named so from the Latin word navis, which means ship. And if you look at this wood ceiling, and churches often have wood ceilings for this purpose, it is intended to be the inverted hull of a ship. You see the symbol of an anchor right there and right here. The ship imagery is all over the place. Way back there in the corner, there is an image of a dolphin. Several times when I have sailed, dolphins have come, as they do, and swim under the bow of the boat as if they're leading you onward. And that's an image of Christ. Covenant has held this church together for over 100 years. Pastors have come and gone, beginning with Reverend Richie Jones Briggs in 1901. And Briggs begat Snyder, and Snyder begat Frost, and Frost begat Hogue, and Hogue begat Maxwell, and Maxwell begat Cole, and Cole begat Miller, and Miller begat Matthews, and Matthews begat Towery, who abided with us for 30 years, and Towery begat Canada, and Canada begat Vandestat. And betwixt and between there have been interims, Kelly Barnett, Sarah Bentley, Rich Thompson, Frank Dietz, and now Amelia Fulbright. They have come and gone, and the church continues and will continue. Each have served in their time and blessed us and led us. We are a people of covenant with each other, with our heritage, and with our vision. There is a particular place where covenant is parsed in a way that I find appealing and profound. And that's at the wedding service. I insist in every wedding at which I preside that the couple recite the traditional vows. They can add to them whatever vows they want to say, which are usually quite forgettable. But I have no idea what I said at our wedding. But the traditional vows are there. They should repeat the words because they are so familiar to all of us. The reason is that when they say these words, all the rest of us, some of us who have said those same words ourselves, and others who have heard them again and again, can ponder what they have meant in our lives, how we have or have not lived them out. Every time I lead a couple through these phrases, I remember when I stood in that place, and I recited those words, and I ponder how I have succeeded and how I have failed, what I have promised, and I recommit myself. The words said at the wedding ceremony describe what is or should be true of any relationship, whether it is a covenant of friendship, a covenant between parent and child, or even the covenant of a congregational church. The same codes apply. So even though I use these words of the wedding service, I am not speaking here of marriage. I am talking about relationship, and I'm talking about church. So in that portion of the wedding service called the Declaration of Intent, popularly referred to as the I do's, the officiant asks each if they are present here of their own will, ready to enter into the covenant of marriage. So 44 years ago, I was asked, Whit, do you take Betty to be your wife, to live together in the covenant of marriage? Will you love her, comfort her, honor and keep her, and forsaking all others, be faithful to her as long as you both shall live? I said, yeah. I said, I will. Good relationships are built upon a sense of covenant, whether spoken or unspoken, and the corner posts are love, comfort, honor, and keep. Love is a sloppy word that can be serious or silly sometimes at the same time. But here, love refers to desire. Now, we know that in the context of wedding, that has a certain resonance. But any relationship requires an essential longing. At the minimum, the desire is to be in relationship, yearning for the presence of the other, and unsatisfied a bit without it. For a church, it is simply the desire to be church, to be part of this community, a community with Christ and with one another. This community, our community. The pledge reads, "And forsaking all others, be faithful to her as long as you both shall live." We choose this church. There are lots of other churches, good churches, great churches, but we have chosen this church. And we come to it with a wanting. Comfort. It is no exceptional wisdom to know that a component of every relationship is the work of comforting, of healing and restoration. So I read again, ironically, I didn't know this was going to be the invocation. Jesus said, "Come unto me, all ye that are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." Jesus speaks those words to us. Should we not also speak them to one another? Should not these words fall from the rafters and seep out from the grates? Should not everyone coming through these doors with heavy hearts feel that we are a place of rest and restoration? It is our covenant to make it so. And so it is with honor. We talk a lot about comforting in church. We talk a lot about love. We don't talk a lot about honoring. It is not just to recognize worth. It is to magnify worth. We have a word for it that we sing and pray often in this church, though it doesn't, I think, appear in any of the first two hymns. But it is on the cover of the hymnal. Glory. Glorify God, we say. Glorify one another. Lift up the goodness in every soul. The best glorification happens without trumpets, quietly, consistently, almost imperceptibly, giving attention, remembering, inquiring of one another, seeing. Love, comfort, honor, and keep. This last was explained to me by a groom at a wedding that I did long ago. He was a lawyer, and he told me that keep in legalese is to protect, to have in safekeeping. What are the ways in which we protect those with whom we are in covenant? It is not so much the physical danger that is at stake here, though sometimes that is true. Protecting rightly is an alliance against the terrors of the world, and equally against its temptations. CJ spoke last week of apathy. Can we protect one another against apathy, from apathy? Surely this church should protect all present from the soft couch of unconcern. Now, we could spend a great deal of time sorting through the permutations and intersections of these four: love, comfort, honor, and keep. But I leave you with those words to ponder, to carry with you, to discover in any given situation which and what it is that calls to you as you live out your various covenants. It is incumbent upon us to think through how it is that loving, comforting, honoring, and keeping guide us in our life as a church together. That is, how it is that we love each other and what it means actually to love this church. How we comfort one another and how we make this church a place of comfort for the heavy laden. How we honor one another and make this church a place in which the worth of every individual is magnified and celebrated, and how we protect each other and protect this, our church, from despair, indifference, lassitude, and superficiality. The church is an organism, a living presence that has as its life above and beyond the collective life of its members. People come and go, pastors come and go, babies come, others die, and the church goes on. We have a history and we have a future, and both are beautiful. Our history is preserved by our enduring covenant, and our future is warranted by the covenant we profess today for tomorrow. So, my friends, I ask you, will you have this community to be your church, to live together in the covenant of Christ? Will you love her, comfort her, honor and keep her, and forsaking all others, be faithful to her as long as you both shall live? Life hangs in the balance. Justice, mercy, holiness, beauty, restoration, sorrow, and delight. All these are the counsels of covenant. May God bless this tie that binds.